Martial art is not a game for me. It is not sport. It is not an Olympic sport. It is not a competition. It is not a tournament. It is a lifestyle, and it is for survival. So the whole purpose of my training is to live longer, to live in peace, to be healthy, to be strong, um, to be able to defend myself during life-threatening situations. So I don't play games with martial art. To me, there's a difference between art and sport or competition or games. It's not martial game. It's not martial sport. It's not martial competition. It is martial art. So art, there's creativity involved. There's a spiritualness involved. There's a meditation involved. There's wisdom involved. There's humility. There's courage. There's strength. There's power. I've been training for my whole life pretty much. I consider myself starting at the age of 9 and been training for like over 3 decades. And I plan to continue to train until I die. And I put my whole life's work into the martial art. And I created my own art, my own expression, my own kung fu. Not only am I a creator, but I teach others to be on the path. And I dedicated everything into this, so I'm not just a regular student attending somebody else's school and practicing somebody else's art. I created my own school, I created my own art, and this is what I teach, this is what I do. So what I do is not necessarily what other kung fu people do or what other martial artists do. So, I really try to hold strong to Bruce Lee's teachings. He's one of my biggest inspirations. So if anything, I look at my expression to be an extension to his expression, to Jeet Kune Do, and that way. I'm also very much connected to the Tao and Tao Te Ching, the teachings of Buddha, teachings of Lao Tzu, teachings of Osho, of meditation. So I see that a lot of schools, a lot of gyms, a lot of styles, they have pretty much favored competition. Very few places will study the arts and practice the arts for the artistry and for the lifestyle like what I'm doing. So my approach is I really am fascinated about the science of unarmed combat, and being a mastery of that fighting arrangement where you reach the pinnacle of self-defense abilities with absolutely no limitations on what you might need to do for survival. And that is not something that has or ever will be, turned into a sport. It's as unethical as using having human beings fight to death for our entertainment. It's as unethical as having dogs come together and fight until death for our entertainment, or any animals for that matter, like coming together to fight for our entertainment, fighting to death for our entertainment. To me, that's what I train for, is to really understand the science behind what needs to be developed in order to train to survive deadly encounters. Um, Specifically with no weapons at this point, but we do train with weapons such as firearms and knives and staffs and sticks and all sorts of things. But my gravitation is toward the unarmed. But if you look at it in the perspective of people that are armed, which there are a lot of armed civilians out there, they clearly don't play games. If they feel threatened or they feel that their life is at risk, then they will have no problem shooting and killing you. And that's been happening out there a lot in the media, so, or just out there in the society. That's not my natural, like, passion, but is something that I do put into my practice. It is something that I do train in. But it's just, to me, it's too easy. It's just not artistic to me. It's just too much of pure survival and just pure violence that it can lead towards. What I like about the unarmed combat is that it takes a lot of hard work to get to the point where you have truly turned your own body into a lethal weapon. And I enjoy that challenge of being truly capable in kicking, punching, elbowing, kneeing, joint locking, ground fighting, or whatever. I really, really enjoy being truly capable in all those elements and working hard towards being extremely proficient in those elements. But when it comes to competing, because I train in survival methods, it is not meant to be used as a form of competition. It's not meant to be used for tournaments. It's not meant to be used to entertain. Because it is revolved around survival, with little to no limitations on what you would do to survive a certain situation. And that would be similar to somebody who is armed with a firearm or a blade, and they will use that to kill when necessary. So you take the firearm away, you take the blade away, and it's just your own body, and you're using your own body to kill if you need to, because that's what the circumstance is requiring, then that's what you're instinctively trained to respond in that way. That type of instinct is not the same instinct that is trained for sport. So if you noticed, as sport becomes more popular, you make more money. Usually the more money you make, the less real that it is. So you got people that fight on the streets. Maybe they're not fighting scientifically, but they're fighting on the streets. That is real fighting, with or without weapons. That is not for profit. That is just violence that's happening, and it's a crime that's occurring, and the law deals with the situation, certain consequences and whatnot. There's no money, no profit involved. It might be caught on security camera, it might be caught on somebody's cell phone, or it might not be on video at all. So that's just pure fighting. And then you got something like maybe the cage fighting, where there are rules, there's things that you can and can't do. There's protective equipment, and there's medical personnel standing by, and there's a whole entertainment aspect to it. Yeah, it's violent, but it's not like violence on the streets. Obviously, it's controlled violence for entertainment purposes, and they make a certain amount of money based on how how profitable, how popular that sport is. And then you go into boxing, or say kickboxing, which is not as popular in America, but maybe more popular overseas, which just there may be more rules enforced, you know, bigger, more protective equipment, bigger gloves, things like that. And then you got boxing, which don't have to worry about the kicks, don't have to worry about the wrestling or the ground fighting, just fighting people with the fists, with gloves. And usually the boxing makes the most money compared to the ones that I just listed. So you see the evolution of how it progresses. When it's the most real, it makes the least the money. It makes no money. When it becomes a little less real, then you start making more money. And then when it becomes even less real than that, then you make even more money, because the boxers get paid pretty well. And then you might go into the movies like Hollywood, and some of the actors get paid more money than the boxers. And that obviously it's not sport, it's entertainment. There comes the art of what they're expressing. So basically the way that it goes is like the more money that you're making, then it just becomes less and less real. So really, like, real combat with no rules, it's in a scientific way, in a martial art way, in an artistry way, it's right after the real fighting on the streets. Real fighting on the streets is just the violence. And then the martial arts, the artistry of it, the science of it is right after that. And then comes the sport, and then all the other stuff. So really, it's the closest to the reality, because it's focused on the no rules, the no limitations. And essentially, you're training with no limitations, and the only rules that there are the rules that you impose yourself. There's no rules that are imposed by any outside governing force. If anything, you might use the rule of law to determine whether or not you're justified in protecting your life during a certain situation. And usually the rule of law will allow you to take somebody's life if that person is threatening your life. So in actuality, you have the freedom to do what's necessary to protect yourself, even if it is pulling out a firearm or a knife or whatever, a weapon. But if it's not pulling out a weapon, then it's your own body that you will use to take care of the situation. And very few people will be in that element of practice. The martial arts is so much become forgotten and unappreciated that mostly everybody else is focused on all the sports and the Hollywood stuff. And the martial arts, it's not even in people's radar anymore. And there's just a strong lack of appreciation for that element. But that's the part that I am gravitated towards. That's the part that Bruce was studying so intently and expressing, and that's the part that I want to express and keep that alive. So when I practice, it's for development, it's for training with people that I trust, training with people that respect me, training with people that are family or friends or people that are truly interested in learning this way. And then what we do is we come together and we spar, which is like a controlled, safe atmosphere to learn how to improve your skill sets as a martial artist. It's not a competition. Sparring is an opportunity to learn in a safe atmosphere with respect. So it's not the same as just, you know, um, challenge, somebody challenging another school and another school comes in and then you fight to see who's better. It's not that, because if anything, it can't be done in that way, because whatever their methods are not lined up with the philosophy of our approach. And because their methods are not lined up with our philosophy, then it can essentially turn into like a real fight, and with no rules. And at that point, it gets into what you see in the street violence, which is clearly not something that is artful. So, we train, we spar, but it has to be under the right circumstances, and there has to be the respect, and there has to be that certain energy and understanding of the philosophy of how we approach our sparring. It has to line up, because if it doesn't line up, then you just cannot really work together and in any way that is going to be safe and productive, for both parties. So, I mean, that's essentially what it is. It's just kind of like somebody who boxes professionally, and then somebody else, is an Olympic wrestler. They're both good at what they do, but their sports are completely opposite, and can't mix them together because they're just opposite sports. One's on the ground, one's standing up, and it just is what it is. It's like a track and field athlete who runs, and then a swimmer who swims. It's like they can't compete with each other because they're completely opposite sports. They're different, very different. So when you got like somebody who trains in the real martial arts and for survival, it is not the same as all these other styles out there that are all focused on competition. Because they're focused on the competition, we're focused on survival. They are completely different. It's a completely different approach. The outsiders might call both methods martial arts, but in actuality, there is the martial art, which is the survival artistry training as a lifestyle, and then there is the sport, the combat sport, which is, they're diametrically like polar opposites. And labeling both the same as one is not proper. That is not the truth. It's just like having two people that might look like they're, look like each other, but they're not the same person. They have different names, they have different social security numbers, different fingerprints, different histories, different beings. Like, when people say that they practice martial art, I don't think they truly understand. A lot of them are not truly practicing martial art. They're practicing some sort of sport, some sort of game. True martial art is something where it's not a game. You train for survival, and you train, as a lifestyle, and it's just a part of who you are. And it's not about winning, it's not about losing, but it's about, when you spar, it's about learning, right? And then when the time comes when you do have to protect your life, then there's no winning or losing. There's just surviving that moment and doing what you need to do to survive that moment. You know, and the way that you approach it, the training methods, and like the reflexes and just the response, it's very specific, and you have to train your body to be able to respond in that moment in its utmost efficiency. And that approach is very specific. That's not the same approach that what the sport athletes do. So another example might be, you know, you got bodybuilders who train for a certain thing with a certain goal, certain objective. And then you got like powerlifters that train weightlift for a certain objective. And then you might have football players that train that lift weights for a certain objective. And then you got a track runner who might lift weights and train for a certain objective. So all four of the athletes, they all lift weights, but they're all lifting in a certain way for a certain objective. And they all practice different sports. So with martial arts, there's a certain approach, a certain formula, a way that you train that sets you apart from other people who practice combat sport. You know, they have their own limitations that are going to be determined by that sport, by that game. But a martial artist, a real martial artist, is not bound by those rules from the game. A real martial artist essentially has no rules, or it's rules that he may create himself, that he may decide that he may not want to break those rules out of his own decision. And that's a totally different way of approaching the science behind combat. You know, so some martial artists might be like, you know what, I'll never carry a gun, I'll never use a gun. Some martial artists would be like, you know what, I'll never carry a knife, I'll never use a knife. And some martial artists would be like, hey, you know, like, they may not never feel comfortable taking somebody's life, even if they're justified in doing so. They might even allow that person to kill them before they kill to protect themselves. You know, everybody's a little bit different in how they're going to approach the situation. But it's the individual from the inside that determines that, not the outside sporting industries and the entertainment industry imposing what they think is, you know, fair or unfair, or what is considered cheating and not cheating. Because really, when it boils down to it, if say hypothetically, if a woman is getting raped, you can't tell her that she can't do what she needs to do to survive that situation, you know. Or just a man is just getting potentially beaten to death, or somebody's threatening this person's life, then you will have to do what is necessary to protect your life in that situation. So the approach, you have these survival methods that you rely on, and you train that into your body to respond instinctively, and you do what you need to do to survive that situation. And hopefully, you know, you might be training your whole life, and hopefully you never have to do that, never have to really express that in real life, and you only keep training to prepare, you know, to spar, to work on like being ready, but you never really have to ever use it, hopefully. But there might be a time when you may have to use it, and then you are ready. You know, so just think about it like this, you know, you got people that are armed out there with guns, and they're supposed to use it when necessary. And then any other weapons on top of that, you know, knives, batons, or whatever, Then you got those people, and then you had the people that choose to not carry any weapons, but they use their whole body and to defend themselves in case something happens where they need to. And those people, that specific niche, that's where my focus and attention is on right now. The development of that, to be the most proficient that you possibly can in protecting your life during like dangerous encounters. And then you got the majority of the public who are training for some sort of competition, some sort of game where they basically play fight and then they focus on the play fighting. So for me, I don't focus on that. I don't focus on the play fighting. I don't focus on the competition. I focus on the survival training, specifically that. And as of right now, yes, I train with the weapons, but that is not my primary element that I'm most interested in. My primary element is training to be the best that I possibly can in the art of unarmed combat, with absolutely no limitation in what would need to be done in order to survive a dangerous encounter. And that specific practice is extremely rare to find, because most people, because that part of the martial art is very unprofitable, and very something that cannot really be exploited the way everything else is being exploited. So because I practice that specific part, it's a rarity, you know. But really, that's what Bruce was teaching, and I choose to continue to follow in that path and to express myself as an artist as long as I live while on that path.